Hey everyone, and Happy New Year! Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted. I hope you all had wonderful holidays and a lot of fun and are looking forward to a new year of fun, some magic, and just good times in general. I'll probably be posting some kind of update video this weekend, I hope. I don't want to be a liar, but it is a busy time. I'm about to switch jobs, so my mind is kind of all over the place. But there's a few things I wanted to work on, and I know there's a few things from last update I haven't gotten to that I would like to put together. But until then, let's take a look at our donation deck of the day. This is Tuvasa the Sunlit, a Merfolk Kindred and Enchantment deck coming from Shirok. Thank you so much, Shirok, for supporting the channel, and they say, this is a 3-color Merfolk tribal deck. I included some of the white Merfolk cards as well for more diversity. With all the new Merfolk cards and support from the newest Commander deck, they want to know if any of them should be added or if there's any main cards they missed. The deck is mainly Merfolk tribal with the Enchantment sub-theme to support them and of course work with the Commander. They also say they have a $20 per card budget, which I think I am holding to. We will see in a moment. But this is a very interesting deck and a very interesting idea. And so we're going to talk about the deck, we're going to talk about the idea, and we're probably going to talk a little bit about the mechanic of taking something that's well known, like a Kindred deck, and giving it a little bit of a twist, such as with these enchantments. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. Alright, so who is Tuvasa the Sunlit, and what are we going to do with them in this Merfolk enchantment mix, Merchantment? So they're a 3-mana Bant Merfolk Shaman, that's green, white, blue, 1/1. They get +1/+1 for each enchantment you control, and whenever you cast your first enchantment spell each turn, draw a card. Now this is really interesting. And by itself, Tuvasa is generally just seen as an enchantment, a Bant enchantment deck. I think they came in the enchantment deck with Estrid, is it? I could be wrong on that name, but a Bant enchantment commander. And Enchantment has had so many different kind of color combinations and new commanders in the last while, even new commander decks. So there's so many flavors to kind of put it all together. In fact, I'm building my own enchantment deck on the side right now. But Tuvasa is a little interesting because of that Merfolk, text with the new commander deck. So instead of going too far into just talking about what Tuvasa can do, because it's kind of what you see is what you get, let's briefly talk about what a card like this can do for a Merfolk deck, or any form of like Kindred style deck. You could do this in Shamans if you wanted, for all intents and purposes. Well, let's actually talk about specifically Merfolk. Merfolk in Commander is traditionally a green-blue tribe, especially with the new return to Ixalan, where the Merfolk are green-blue, where we've just gotten a bunch of new cards here that are very green-blue centric. So what we look at is when we're trying to put, a 3-color commander into a 2-color pairing, or a 2-color strategy, we try to focus on what that third color brings. Now, white does bring quite a few extra Merfolk. I believe the Lorwyn Merfolk have white mana, and I'm pretty sure a bunch of other Merfolk here and there do have white mana. But there's like great support spells, great removal spells. We'll see a lot of them in the deck itself. But something that's worth considering is also, what does white and enchantments bring? Now, the easiest thing is that we have a draw engine on our commander, and I really do like that. And for a deck that's Kindred, we can set up, instead of being extremely explosive traditionally, we can set up decks that are more grindy with the idea that we're almost guaranteed a card draw every turn. If that kind of makes sense, it's the kind of way I try to look at when I'm changing an archetype with a new twist. I look what that twist can do for the deck and where its support will lie. And sometimes that does, in fact, change what the core of the deck is. So looking at the deck list itself, a lot of it is what I would consider to be a traditional Merfolk Kindred deck. We've got a lot of creatures, we have some Kindred support, and we have maybe, and I'm going to say maybe, a few more enchantments than we would regularly play. Now, obviously, I'm going to add a few merfolk from the new set, but one of the main things I want to put a little attention on is we could go deeper into enchantments. I'm not saying going up to 30 or something, but at least like we could get to 25 pretty easily and still, benefit from it, especially if we consider the fact that almost all of our enchantments have a hidden text that says if this is the first one you've played this turn, draw a card, which makes a lot of these easier to play. Let me take out my list here. I think, let's see, there was one here that I saw. Perfect. I think a lot of these I really like, and we're going to go over some of them. But let's start with the things that we always start with. Let's start with the curve. The curve it's good. I wouldn't mind more 1-drops in our colors. I think even if we just simply went and looked at our 1-mana Merfolk, which I know there's not a great amount, but we could also even, let's go like this. We can also even take a look at if we wanted to, yeah, there's definitely some playable ones here. We could also, if we want later, look at mana dorks, mono green mana dorks, which I think are worth playing. But looking at these, honestly, things like Tideshaper, Curse Catcher, Benthic Biomancer, the Cloaked Herald. I think there's a lot of very good merfolk at 1 mana that we could be playing to kind of make the curve a little nicer, because we have only 1 merfolk at 1 mana. We have 3 reactive spells, 1 support spell, ramp, and 1 more support spell. And I think as a deck that can run pretty low to the ground, I wouldn't mind if we had more low mana. Our commander, our main spells are at 3, and our commander is at 3, and we don't have ways to ramp into 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this 3-drop location and be kind of critical on it as our cuts. And the other thing, as always, it seems, we're running 33 lands, which feels just a little low. I recognize our curve does kind of end mainly. There's 1 at 6. There's a few at 5. Our curve ends early, but I still wouldn't mind us to be able to get to like at least 35 lands. If we're assuming the fact is we're just going to kind of stop at 3, and then all of our enchantments will cycle, hopefully getting us extra draw into lands. It's not the worst thing, but I do think we could do a little better. And, what I'm going to do is we're going to look at 3 mana, but before we do, looking at the mana, I feel like we have a lot of mana rocks. I think maybe our mana problems are easier to solve than we need. So let's briefly really talk about mana rocks. What do mana rocks do? This is something I talk about every now and then, especially about which mana rocks to use, but this is kind of more of a general idea. What does Arcane Signet do for us, right? The easiest answer is that it fixes our mana, which is not incorrect, but we have quite a good mana base from what I see, so what it also does is it ramps us. Once again, pretty straightforward stuff. However, not every deck requires ramp in this form, right? I definitely would like things like I have Wild Growth that I'm going to suggest, which I think is a good ramp card because it's a 1-mana enchantment, so it'll at least draw us a card. But Arcane Signet, it's going to take a turn off for us in order to ramp into higher mana. But what are we doing on the turn that we are taking off? Well, we can see we have a large group of 2-mana enchantments and 2-mana merfolk, so we're not casting those, and we are using this to ramp into not much, right? A lot of our 3-mana spells, that's the majority of our deck, will not require ramp on turn 2 to get to. That's traditionally to get to 4-mana spells, which we do have some strong ones, but it does feel somewhat unnecessary, right? I do think there is a limit on the usefulness of ramp, whereas I think I would just rather these 4 ramp cards to just be lands. That way we can just go up to 37 lands and not worry about missing land drops, which will fix our mana because we'll just keep playing lands, and just kind of not care too much about ramping. I just don't think that's where we're going to really want to be. We don't have what I would consider a finisher spell that could win us a game out of nowhere, And so I would just rather us play steadily, slow and steadily. I think that's going to be the theme of my additions and ideas for the deck, is we need to make this a little slow and steady. We're playing Tuvasa and we want to make the most out of them. All right, let's look at 3-drops really quickly, because I do see that there is quite a bit. And generally what I try to do is avoid being too critical on the kindred of the deck, right? It's often I just try to assume that the player who is making their tribe-based deck or their typal deck or kindred deck knows what they want out of that type and are generally happy with them. But we'll still take a kind of a quick look. And I think Harpoon Sniper is the one that's the most visibly like specific. You require mana in order to play and use their ability, and otherwise they're just a 2/2. And they're also like a hyper-specific kind of... They're a very specific kind of removal spell. I think they're too narrow. Like, we have access to white, and we are already playing Generous Gift, we're already playing Path, we're playing Swords. I don't think we particularly need something as clunky as the Harpoon Sniper, though this is really, really cool art, and I love Lorwyn. I think this one could easily be cut. Let's see. Shapers of Nature also looks a little too cute. This is a card that is a mana sink, and outside of like our +1/+1 mana counter synergies, which are attached to our commander, this is kind of like 7 mana draw card. And I think we can do a lot better than that. This is just a clunky card. Once again, really nice art, but I think very easily we can just toss this out. We just don't have the mana. We're not going to be able to cast these things, because with our steady card draw, with our steady production of creatures, we're not going to be able to take turn off or mana off to reasonably draw cards with this card. So that's another one I would cut very, very easily. Stony Brook Schoolmaster is really interesting to me. There's a bit of a tapped... You know what? I'm gonna suggest something, actually. There's a bit of a synergy with Merfolk getting tapped. And for that, I think we could use a few other cards to do that. And I think one of them that's really easy and works as a bit of fixing and ramp at a low mana cost is Springleaf Drum. Because I do really like Stony Brook Schoolmaster, and this is the kind of card that I'm very interested in when we talk about what we're adding in with white. Because this is something that the blue and green ones have a harder time doing, and it is a really cool ability. So we want a way to tap down the Stony Brook Schoolmaster without having to attack. Now, when we have the setup where we have the Island Walk or the +1/+1s from our other lords, that gets easier, but early game, and if our opponents all have blockers, Stony Brook can kind of get locked. So something like Springleaf Drum could help that. So could, of course, Paradise Mantle. Notably, Paradise Mantle has an infinite combo with a 2-mana Merfolk, which I don't believe you're playing, which untaps itself with 1 colored mana in order to, I believe, mill the top card of your deck. And with Paradise Mantle and that card, you can tap and untap it 1,000,000 times. I'll leave that for you. I can't remember the name, but that could be a combo if you wanted to use with some of your untap cards. So Stony Brook Schoolmaster I do like, and cards like Paradise Mantle and Springleaf Drum give you ways of tapping them down. I will have a few others, but those weren't on the list and I wanted to add them. The rest of our Merfolk look really, really good. Sorceries. All right, so Cultivate as well, I'm kind of uninterested in. Once again, let's go back to that whole idea of ramp. Now let's go back to, I said there was something I usually talked about, and that is, which ramp spells are we using? Cultivate is a ramp spell to get us to 5 mana. It is not one to get us, you know, from 1 to 3, which is the one we need here. If this was like Birds of Paradise, I would be very much so down for it, but it is not. It is instead, it's 3 mana to 5, and we don't have that many 5-drops. I recognize there's this feeling, I get this feeling, everyone gets this feeling, where we think like, we aren't doing well in Commander if we don't have like 50 lands in play. I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but in the sense that, like, we look around, it is a format where we are trying to feel good, trying to throw down big splashy things. Everyone's ramping, everyone's making mana rocks. If you don't untap with like 12 mana, you're behind, is a feeling that I've noticed every now and then. But we're kind of stepping out of that age, and I hope I'm helping to do so. I think it's very reasonable for commander decks to be incredibly low to the ground and still function when they don't have more than 5 lands. Yeah, you're not going to have the explosive plays that certain engine decks or big mana decks have access to, but you're still going to be able to play your game. So with Cultivate, this is a card that just functions in those big mana style archetypes, or that old feeling of needing a bunch of mana, but doesn't really do much for this deck. The solution for mana fixing in this deck is in one mana creatures and enchantments, or honestly better mana fixing in your lands. And your lands are very, very good. So when we look at Cultivate, when we think about Cultivate, this should be in our mindset. What are we giving up to play this? And what turn do you cast this on? Because you can't cast it when you have 3 mana, because you're going to cast your commander. So when are you casting this? On turn 4? That doesn't feel very good. You are going to give up another play to do so. So you're probably going to cast this turn 5 or something. And then, of course, why are you casting turn 5? So I really don't like this here, and I think it's very easy to cut out. So, Harsh Mercy. This is a card that I think could be very, very good or very, very bad. If you are... This is a metagame call, which isn't always the most fun thing to say, but because it's not really good advice, but it's true, right? If you hang out with a bunch of people who play Kindred decks, or have decks that have a high Kindred ratio, so if someone has like Aristocrats, they would have vampires quite a bit, for example. It's just kind of how it shakes out a lot of the time. Or honestly, they wouldn't mind if all their creatures died. So if a lot of people have Kindred decks, this is a very, very bad card. If they do not have Kindred decks, then this is a very, very good card. I really, really like it. And I think it's definitely worth running most of the time, because what this can actually read as is each player sacrifices a quarter to half of the creatures they have in play. Remember, if an opponent has 1 creature, this doesn't do anything. But if they have 2, then you are forcing them to sacrifice half their creatures. Not every time, but like a portion of the time. Certain decks, if you're like me and you build Kindred decks like I do, where you will play non-Kindred deck cards in your Kindred deck, this will hit it a lot of the time. So I think you will still get hits with this. I'm having a struggle. I don't know how much I like it. I think you should test it, but you should be very critical of it. And if there's too much Kindred, I would just toss this right out. It is a really cool card, does a very, very specific thing. And when that thing is good, the card is very, very good. Playing both Beast Within and Generous Gift is rather good. I'm a big fan. Quicksilver Fountain is really, really cool. Is it good enough? Right? I think it's fun. This is a card that's kind of like a strange Blood Moon, because what it does is it forces things to be islands one at a time. And what's interesting about it is that it doesn't scale differently in multiplayer, because it goes each player at a time. So it's the same amount of time between 1 player to 3 players in the game with this effect, because it's just each player is going to do it. The thing that makes it whether or not it's going to last is the land production and the land amount when it starts. So if everyone has 5 lands and they continue to play a land every turn, then, in a way, this will stay on forever. However, we know people don't play lands forever. And blue players' island cards are actually deleted from the list because they already are islands. So what you could do is sit down and do a little calculation, think to yourself, all right, there are 7 let's say 8 non-island cards on the battlefield, because we have to remember, as a blue deck, we are bringing quite a few islands. So there's 8 non-islands, and then in a turn cycle, maybe 1 or 2 non-islands are being added to the battlefield. What does that mean? How does that shake up? The problem is that you have the most islands, and you're going to run out of islands first. Or if there is a 2-color deck with blue, they are going to run out of non-islands first. They're going to, specifically play islands in order to get Quicksilver Fountain to overflow. And when it overflows, everything comes back. Now, that doesn't mean, the thing that's interesting is Quicksilver Fountain is fine with this because it's just ready to start all over again. So this is a really, really cool card, but its actual strength is kind of dubious. What I'm going to say is, with the Island Walk synergies in this deck, I do like it, but I think you have more meaningful ways to kind of deal with islands, and this is not going to do what you want it to do most of the time. Because let's think about who we want to hate out of the game with this kind of ability the most, and the answer is land decks, right? They have lands that are very powerful, they rely on them, they're going to do some really cool things with Field of the Dead or other stuff, and we want to be able to turn those cards off. However, this card will never beat that player, because that player is the most likely to have more and more lands in play, and most likely the most non-island cards. So they can just be there, always putting a flood counter and still have a bunch of different lands to tap or to add to the battlefield. Whereas, if you're playing against my Ashnod deck, which runs just swamps and a few utility lands, I'm going to suffer the most because all of my mana is being taken away, and I have probably a few number of swamps. So everyone's going to be flooding, but I'm the one that's going to be completely flooded first. And if that land deck is at the same table as me, they'll never have to worry because they'll just look at me and say, well, Curse is going to run out of lands, and then all of the flood counters. Hold on, I thought of that wrong. It's all lands in play. Okay, so it's not that bad. So it's not, okay. So the same, I momentarily got myself confused. Okay, so it's still gonna suck for me because I will be stuck waiting on having mana again if I'm out of lands and I'm out of non-islands, whereas other decks, yeah, okay. I don't like this. I don't know how long that rant was, but I don't like this card, and it is a very, very cool card, and I'm very upset that I don't like it. It is clunky, and I don't think it's going to do what you want it to do. Because even if the bar is, I would like each player to have an island, I think there's going to be better options, and I think there's going to be situations where you yourself are going to be locked out of some of your mana because of this fountain in a 3-color deck. So it's cool. It is so, so cool. Don't play it. I think maybe if you were in mono blue or something, this would be fine. All right, enchantments. Let's finish off our 3 slots so we can finally talk about additions and other ideas. I generally like these. I think Aura Shards and Broker's Ascendancy are really, really cool because they represent, especially Aura Shards, what white can bring to this kind of deck that it wouldn't have access to before. And Aura Shards is very, very strong, especially in this deck, and to have access to it is really, really nice. However, Ghostly Prison and Propaganda, on the other hand, I don't particularly like. We're not a defensive deck. We are the aggro. And earlier, like I said, we want to be a slow and steady deck. We want to be slow and steady in adding to the board, in presenting threats, in presenting, questions our opponents have to answer. We shouldn't need to be defending ourselves with stuff like Ghostly Prison, whereas when we can instead be using those enchantment slots to further our game. Okay, so I would cut those. So not as much as I'd like, but still a good amount of cuts. Looking around, there's a few other things here and there that do kind of pique my eye. I think Mercfiend Liege is really, really cool. if we can do other things, which I do have the means to make this good in the cards that I'm adding, so I'm going to say keep it for now. But if you don't use the additions, mainly ones that make our Merfolk tap for mana and the other that give our Merfolk flash, if we don't have those, Murkfiend Liege gets just a little weaker. Don't get me wrong, +2/+2 across your board is almost half of El Schnorn. That's not bad. But if we're not taking advantage of the tapping, untapping all the time, which as I've mentioned a few times, we have the means to take advantage of, then I don't know to what degree we're going to be able to use this. So it's close. I think it's fine. I think it is good. Voldarian Wave Knight is really, really cool. I think this is a very, very strong addition to the deck. I actually haven't seen this card before. I didn't really take a look at the Knight deck, and seeing this makes me go, this is really, really cool, and I do really, really like that in this deck. I'm very glad they said Merfolk or Knight, because otherwise this would be a hyper, hyper specific card, and so I do like this as an addition here. Tetiova, on the other hand, I don't think Tetiova belongs here. As we said before, you're few on lands. I want you to remove the land ramp. I don't think she belongs here. She is on the slow and steady spectrum, but like, this is too slow. This is too steady. You don't have the means to like trigger her more than once. I don't see fetch lands. I think we're not going to use her because it's like your commander where you're getting one extra draw a turn, but you're even more reliant on your deck. I don't know. And it's 5 mana. I don't particularly like her here. I think I would cut her. Farseek, I would cut. Let's see. Swan Song and Counterspell and Dovin's Veto are probably, you could cut that down to 2 instead of 3. I would probably keep the Veto and the Counterspell. Swan Song is probably unnecessary here, and that 2/2 can be a real problem for you for certain attacks. And I think the rest here are very good. Teleportation Circle. What are we teleporting? I need to look through your creatures again, because I feel like we can do better than the Skydiver. So the Skydiver is an ETB, and I don't really like it. Let's see. How many ETBs do we have? I feel like we don't have very many. Here's one, 400s, look for a Merfolk, so tutor onto your deck. I guess also when you flicker something else, 400 grows. Master of Waves, that's another one. I guess Wanderwine Prophets. Okay, I don't really see... I really like Teleportation Circle, but I don't think it's particularly good here. I guess it works with Kindred Discovery, but even then, I don't think this is good here. I think by itself it does nothing. You don't have enough ETBs. It does nothing with your commander, because obviously enchantment spells entering the battlefield don't do anything if they're enchantment creatures, and also it's not like whenever you cast, it's not this ability triggers only once a turn. It's whenever you cast the first enchantment per turn, so end of the turn. Like no matter what, how many times Tuvasa comes and goes, you've only had one first enchantment, so there is an absolute limit to the kind of cards that the use you can get out of Teleportation Circle, which is too bad. It's a very, very strong card, but here I think it is particularly weak. Okay, I feel like I've gone over... I was hoping to have this into a fast episode. I'm gonna try to get through some fast episodes. Oh well, hopes and dreams. Let's see what we can add and what's on my mind. So let's look at the ones from the new set that I think are immediately really, really pressing to put in here. I think first of all, Deeproot Pilgrimage, very, very good. Whenever one or more non-token Merfolk becomes tapped, create a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature with hexproof. This is bonkers. This is really, really dumb. Obviously, with all sorts of tapping synergies that we're going to have, you're going to create a lot of 1/1s very, very fast. And at the same time, this does encourage you to go into attacks, to do, to kind of extend a bit more, to reap the benefits of tapping your creatures. Now, note, when you attack, you tap them all at the same time. So the trigger will only happen once. When you attack, you tap them all at once. Yeah. So with that in mind, combat is actually not the best way to trigger this, but that being said, you'll still have ways to do this. I guess Convoke could be good too. I didn't think of any Convoke cards. I wonder. You could probably play, but Convoke all taps at the same time, so you'd still only get one creature. But I still very much so like this card. I think it's very, very, very strong, and you're going to be... This will turn your deck into a bit of an engine deck, which is kind of... I guess this is kind of what I've been trying to do, and I haven't said it, so here we go. I think this deck, with Tuvasa and with the white, the main things we can do is kind of lean it towards an engine deck, where we're creating a series of small advantages. Wow, my goodness. Small advantages that we can reap a bunch of different benefits from, whether it be drawing an extra card, getting an extra Merfolk, getting like a little further that way. These are the things that we're going to really want to do, and we're going to be able to get further and further ahead with these little advantages, and Deep Rope Pilgrimage is a really, really good version of that, and I do particularly like it. Something that's also a very, very easy addition is Huckball. Huckball is strong. At the beginning of combat, each Merfolk you control explores. Yes, please. This is so strong. And their attack trigger is also kind of cool, but really play Huckball and you can kind of forget about him. You don't even need to attack if you don't want to. You are going to be growing your board turn after turn. You won't grow everyone because occasionally you will be losing cards to you'll be drawing the lands and they won't get the +1/+1 counters. But even with that in mind, this is just really, really powerful. I know once again, there's a few +1/+1 counter synergy cards that you have. What I prefer in this deck is less synergizing with the +1/+1 counters and just putting them on. I think I'll have a few others or a card here or there that I think will have that same ability. But I don't think we should worry about doing something with the +1/+1 counters. I think we should just focus on putting them on, and we'll be very, very happy when we do. Singer of the Swift Rivers. This is the card that gives flash. I think that is particularly good here. I think the shield counter part of it is kind of interesting, but like maybe cute. I think we're really, really playing it for just the flash. It's like Shimmer Mirror or Urza's Battlethopter, or those cards where they are flash cards that give flash to all of your your kindred or your theme of your deck. And this one is just really, really good. Blue-green is already the color of, drawing cards, making mana, making creatures. And once again, this ability just works so well with this, especially if we can turn our creatures into mana, which we are getting to very, very shortly. Probably the most expensive addition, unless I'm wrong, is Tishana's Tidebinder. So this is a card that's seeing a lot of play in Modern right now, and it is maybe in Legacy too, I actually don't know, but Tishana's Tidebinder is a very, very powerful card. It's kind of tricky. The whole thing is when you flash them in, and then you counter a target activated or triggered ability. Now, if that's attached to a permanent that is an artifact, creature, or planeswalker, that permanent will lose all abilities as long as this card remains on the battlefield. The caveat is mana abilities can't be targeted, and there are a lot of very relevant card-like abilities that are mana abilities that you can't stop. I'm thinking about anything that like sacrifices to create mana, anything that discards to create mana, anything that creates mana as part of its resolution, in addition to doing other things. You can't really interact with that, which is kind of rough. But for a lot of commanders, this allows you to counter something and count like on their commander, and then it just nullifies their commander as long as Tishana's in play, which is really, really cool. Otherwise, I think this is just generally a good value play. I know everyone always thinks about stopping fetch lands and just, countering them to kind of Stone Rain someone, but generally there's a lot of ETBs that you want to stop, or a lot of activated abilities that only trigger once that you want to stop. You can stop Planeswalkers, ultimate abilities. There's just a lot that this card hits, in addition to being a very good 3/2 Merfolk, right? So this is something, now you don't need to grab it. It is expensive, but it is very, very cool. It's funny that the alt art is cheaper than the regular art. I don't like the alt art. It's a bit much. I really like this art. I think it's very, very cool. So if you can grab one of these from the new set, I think you'll be very, very happy. All right, let's look at some enchantments. The two I want to talk about first, let's talk about mana first, and the two easy ones I think that need to go in immediately are Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl. Each of them are 1 mana auras that will enchant your lands and produce colors. Now, Wild Growth goes on to anything and gives you a green, and Utopia Sprawl goes on forests and gives you a non-green. Actually, that's not true. You could say green, but most likely you're going to say non-green. And these are really cool because 1, they are ramp into 3 mana, which, as I said before, is something you really, really want from 1 to 3. But 2, they are notably very good cyclers mid-game. You know, when we have Tuvasa out and we have extra mana here or there, tossing down these Utopia or Wild Growth with the added line of draw a card is just very, very impressive. I think you'll be very, very happy with them. Otherwise, if you have better enchantments to play, you'll play those. But these will always stick in your hand as, hey, do you have some extra mana? Do you have no other enchantments that really you care about drawing a card from? Play this, get that card, fix your mana or improve your mana for the turn that's coming, or improve your mana to play the card you draw sometimes, right? If you get Hellbent and you draw this off the top of your deck, you're pretty happy because it'll draw you the next card, right? So these are both really, really easy to kind of suggest. Notably, Utopia Sprawl can be a problem if you keep the Quicksilver Fountain, because if you put it on a basic forest and it becomes an island, Utopia Sprawl will fall off. So if you continue to play that card, put this onto Breeding Pool. But otherwise, I would say both of these cards are very, very good, hard to interact with. Often people aren't interested in interacting with them because they're 1 mana, so there's not a lot of ways to profitably interact with them. So they're going to leave them alone, which if you have both out, Tuvasa is at least a 3/3 when she comes down, or they come down. I don't actually know their gender, but when they come down, they'll be at least a 3/3, and that's pretty nice. Now, here's the real mana that I think you need to add, and that's Cryptolith Rite. Now, this isn't a white spell. Once again, part of the thing I was thinking about is adding white spells that merfolk don't usually have access to, and I am adding a few, but some of these will be just mono green because of their strength, and Cryptolith Rite is definitely one of them. Getting that ability to tap all of your creatures for mana, both for just the synergy of having more mana this way, but also for the tapping synergies so that we can make the most out of things like Deep Root Pilgrimage and the Stony Brook Schoolmaster, these kind of cards. Cryptolith Rite is just really, really good for this ability. It's just a fantastic card. The fact that it's also an enchantment to draw you a card, I think you're going to be very, very happy. Here's a white card for drawing cards that's interesting to me, and it's Folk Hero. So Folk Hero makes it so that while your commander is out, whenever you cast a merfolk, you'll draw a card. This only triggers once each turn, but obviously works well with like our where were we? Singer of the Swift Rivers to give them flash and to trigger this on other people's turns. But this is also interesting because as a background, you can preemptively play this card so that when your commander comes out early, like you don't have to enchant your commander with this. Like the backgrounds are really cool because they're pseudo auras, but they stay on the battlefield. But the other thing I really like about Folk Hero is that if you cast it after your commander is out, you get that first card draw. Like if you think about this card representing a card each turn, and so does your commander, Folk Hero immediately gives you your commander draw, and hopefully that draws you into mana or a merfolk to play that merfolk and get that Folk Hero draw. So though it doesn't look like it, it does feel like 2 mana draw to the first turn it comes down if you can leverage it that way. And I think already that is really, really good in a deck like this. So Folk Hero feels very, very strong. I think it's one of the more expensive backgrounds, but at $3, I don't think it's that bad. I think it's rather good actually. And I would play that for sure. This one's cute. Ancestral Mask. I just wanted to put this up here because I think makes your cards really, really big, whoever you enchant with, is that you can really reasonably have, like, if you have 4 enchantments and then you play this being your 5th enchantment, that's +10/+10. That's not including your opponents who have Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, I don't know, a number of different enchantments they could be playing. Ancestral Mass can get very, very large, very, very... Oh, each other. So, sorry, my mistake. It won't count it itself. So with 4 enchantments, this is a 4/4. But with your opponents, you can... Sorry, 8/8. With your opponents, you can get higher and higher. But I think this is still just very, very strong. And I like it particularly because your ability to give your Merfolk unblockable is very accessible. And so with that in mind, I think I would definitely grab this, see how it does. I think this card will let you hit for 10 or 12 kind of as a surprise, and then your opponents have to deal with a massive Merfolk. And I really, really like it on our 1/1 blue hexproof Merfolk, which then obviously grow substantial in size and have the hexproof text still, and you can get some really, really good hits with them. So I do like this card. I think it's really interesting. Usually I don't like these kind of effects, but I think here it's particularly strong. All right, let's look at 2 more white cards and then 1 green card. Mirari's Wake is interesting to me because it does a lot of the things. So there's a lot of things about mana that I've been very critical in the deck. And one of the main things is that we don't want to just ramp. And what this card does is it has the just ramp, but it also boosts our creature and it also draws a card. And that's kind of like, I think that's the point that I'm like, okay, I think it's worth playing. Obviously, doubling mana is a very, very strong ability. It makes a dramatic, difference in how much mana you could be presenting. From most likely going from 5 to 10 is a really good number, but also the fact that it's just another general pump up for all your Merfolk, and it draws you a card off your commander, providing with itself and its bonus +2/+2 to your commander. I think it's rather good. I do really, really like it. I think there might be a ceiling on how good it is if you find yourself not being able to draw enough cards, but otherwise I do like the setup here. So I think this is a good inclusion, but I would test it a little bit for sure. Speaking of +1/+1 counters, it's Cathar's Crusade, a card I always suggest and then follow up with maybe don't play this card. So the suggestion is Cathar's Crusade is obviously very, very good in a deck like this. It will make a dramatically large amount of +1/+1 counters, even if you just steadily play 1 creature per turn, which you won't. You'll probably play 2 or 3 per turn, not even including the tokens that you generate. And that's going to be, honestly, way more powerful than anything like Door of Destinies will ever allow. Though it won't feel that way, Door of Destinies feels really, really good. In any deck that can create tokens, Cathar's Crusade is going to be much, much better. So I would very much so recommend this, and here is my unrecommend. This card in paper is really, really hard to keep track of. You need dice on dice on dice on dice. So if you're going to play this, be prepared to have to resolve it. If you do resolve it, if you have the patience and the ability to do so, you're going to be very, very happy with the results, and it's going to be very, very powerful. But if you're one that is easily frustrated or doesn't hold like 50 spin downs in a like sack somewhere, you're going to be a little frustrated by this card. But it is very strong, and I highly recommend it. All right. Then my last edition, to kind of close us off, is another mono green edition, but something I was thinking of, and I'm not sure to what degree I actually feel about it, but this card feels like a pretty good pseudo finisher. Now, as I said before, a lot of what I'm doing here is slowly leading the deck to be more of a, what would we call this? More of a engine deck is what I said. And this would be not an engine finisher, but like an ultimate like engine piece, right? You play this, once again, all of your mana is doubled. Though not literally, you just get 1 more mana from the mana you produce. So if your mana is already doubled, no, both of these will just add 1 more. So it'll triple your original, but it won't double again if you have both out. However, with that much mana, and the ability for every time you cast a creature spell, you draw a card, this is just a very, very powerful card. It lets you basically slam down the rest of your deck in one go, get a board that's very, very powerful. Obviously, just like everything else here, it works very, very well with Singer, so you can get a bunch of creatures in at the end of your last opponent's turn. They untap and you go for the win there. Very, very strong. And of course, the way that this synergizes with our commander is really, really interesting. The way that as an enchantment, we'll draw that first card, but where this has a bit of a problem where it only gives us cards when we cast creatures, our commander will at least get us one extra draw when you play our enchantment. So we should be able to keep going if we draw creature, enchantment, creature, right? We'll be able to keep going that first time. And I think that's really good. I also think, I don't know, I'm always impressed by this card. When this comes down and nobody deals with it, your next turn is just going to be very, very powerful. And I think that's all I have to say about Tuvasa in this build. I feel like this build is just kind of the start of a build. I've kind of pushed it a little more towards enchantments with some of my suggestions here. I don't think I've added that many, but still I think it's worth considering it. I've also pushed it towards a bit of an engine deck because I think that's what these colors and this combination of cards will do the best, will work together the best to create. But I am interested to hear what you think. Is this the kind of direction you want? Or did you want to be more like this deck's original setup here, where we have just a bunch of merfolk and some support that's just generally related? But I think you can do, I think the engine style deck is a lot stronger. The aggro plan never quite goes away. You always have the ability to just aggro out your opponents, which I think is really, really good. And yeah, with that in mind, I think this is going into a very, very good direction. Thank you so much for sending the deck, Shirok. I always like your decks, and I think this is very, very interesting. If you would like to send me another version of this deck or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. If you would like your deck to be the next one I work on, there is a link down there for that as well. And finally, if you could like, comment, subscribe, I would be very, very grateful. I think we hit 450 subscribers over the holidays, and that was really, really cool. I hope everyone's having a wonderful new year, and I'm excited to see what comes out of this deck. So, good luck.